"Stop asking for extra food, old man." The words hit me like a hammer in the quiet dining room. My son, Ethan, sitting across the table, his face red with frustration, hands gripping the edges of his plate. His words were sharp, harsh, and public. My daughter had looked away, uncomfortable, while the family gathered around tried to pretend nothing had happened. Yet everyone heard it. Everyone noticed the tension slicing through what was supposed to be a peaceful dinner. I remained calm. My short gray hair neatly styled, clean-shaven face serene, slightly fuller build seated firmly at the head of the table. My warm, gentle eyes studied him without anger, letting the moment land fully. I could feel the curiosity, the unease, the judgment of those around us. But I didn't flinch. I had learned over the decades that true authority is quiet, deliberate, and patient. Outbursts like Ethan's are fleeting. Consequences when delivered wisely. Ethan slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing across the room. "I'm serious. Stop asking for more. You have more than enough. Why can't you just eat what's on your plate?" His voice carried a mix of frustration and entitlement. He believed he was teaching me a lesson. He thought he was in control. He didn't see the patience in my gaze, the quiet strength behind my calm posture. I smiled faintly, hiding the sting of betrayal and disappointment. "Ethan, there's always room for kindness, and there's always room for patience," I said softly. My tone was gentle, almost soothing, but carried the weight of experience. Rushing, shouting, demanding control, those aren't lessons, son. Those are mistakes that have consequences. He glared at me, clearly angry that I wasn't responding the way he expected. "Consequences? You think I don't have consequences? I make the rules here now." He leaned forward, voice rising, demanding acknowledgement, asserting dominance. The dining room fell silent except for the low hum of the chandelier and the faint clinking of glasses. Even the dog in the corner whimpered at the tension. I remained still, letting his arrogance fester for a moment, knowing that the lesson would not need shouting or confrontation. I had already prepared the steps that would ensure he understood exactly what happens when respect is ignored. Over the years, patience had taught me that impulsive arrogance always meets its reckoning, often quietly, but inevitably. That night I took care of the arrangements, quietly, methodically. Legal notices, accounts frozen, and rental agreements reviewed, all subtle, precise actions designed to assert boundaries he had openly dismissed. I did not act out of anger, nor with malice. My actions were deliberate, controlled, and absolutely inevitable. He had assumed control, disrespected authority, and mocked wisdom. It was time for him to experience consequences that would not be ignored. Morning arrived. The sun spilled over the neighborhood, calm and ordinary, but the outcome of my quiet preparation was anything but ordinary. Ethan awoke to find his home inaccessible, the doors locked with new security measures, and notices indicating that he had been evicted due to overdue payments and administrative decisions he had ignored. Panic replaced arrogance. Confusion replaced defiance. He realized immediately that his control was gone. He ran from room to room, disbelief evident on his face. His entitlement, so solid and loud yesterday, crumbled silently under the weight of consequences he had never anticipated. Staff and neighbors watched, curious, unsure what had happened. And yet, I remained calm, observing, not reveling, but ensuring the lesson landed fully. By mid-morning, Ethan understood, fully and irrevocably, that shouting, demanding, and disrespecting authority do not prevent consequences, they ensure them. The house that had been his home, the comfort he had taken for granted, the power he believed he wielded, it had quietly slipped from his grasp. The weight of reality was heavy, undeniable, and humbling. I stood at the window, short gray hair neat, clean-shaven face serene, slightly fuller build steady, warm eyes observing him across the street. No words were needed. He had learned painfully that patience, preparation, and moral authority always prevail over arrogance and entitlement. That day, my son became a man who would never forget that actions, disrespect, and impulsive dominance carry consequences far heavier than anger itself. By late morning, the weight of reality had fully settled over Ethan. He wandered the streets aimlessly, disbelief etched across his face, the realization of what had happened sinking in with each passing moment. He had shouted, demanded, and disrespected authority, but none of that mattered now. The quiet, deliberate actions I had taken overnight left him with no home, no control, and no immediate recourse. The arrogance that had fueled his anger now twisted into confusion and fear. I stayed in my own home, short gray hair neat, clean-shaven face calm, slightly fuller build steady, warm eyes observing from a distance. I didn't need to intervene directly. Every detail of his downfall had been carefully arranged, locks changed, notifications delivered, and staff prepared to enforce boundaries. My calm presence carried authority stronger than words, and every moment reinforced the lesson he had so foolishly ignored the night before. Ethan's initial outrage began to fade, replaced by frantic attempts to regain control. He tried calling neighbors, friends, and even colleagues, hoping someone could reverse what had happened. But each phone call, each plea, met with the same polite but firm refusal. The lesson was clear. Impulsive entitlement carries consequences that cannot be ignored. And patience combined with preparation is far more powerful than shouting or force. As the hours passed, I watched him from a distance. His posture, once proud and aggressive, slumped with every step. His face, once flushed with arrogance, paled with humiliation. Even the small gestures, the way he fidgeted with his phone, the nervous tapping of his feet, the repeated scanning of the neighborhood, betrayed the internal reckoning taking place. Every detail of his behavior reflected the weight of understanding he had yet to fully articulate. By afternoon, the full scale of his mistake was undeniable. Ethan had lost not only his home, but the sense of certainty he had carried like armor. I remained composed, a steady presence in my own home, knowing that this quiet approach delivered the most powerful lessons. The house, now secure and orderly, reflected the stability and authority that comes from foresight and patience. A stark contrast to the chaos his arrogance had created in his mind. He attempted to negotiate, reaching out again to neighbors and friends. But each effort reminded him of his vulnerability. Every door closed, every refusal reinforced the inevitability of the consequences. The lesson was complete. Respect, patience, and preparation are the pillars that sustain authority, and they cannot be ignored without consequence. By evening, Ethan had stopped running. He stood outside the empty house, defeated, humbled, and finally reflective. He realized that shouting, demanding, and disregarding wisdom cannot prevent consequences. They only invite them. I watched from inside, calm and unwavering. Short gray hair catching the soft sunset. Clean-shaven face serene, slightly fuller build steady. Warm eyes reflecting authority and understanding. The lesson had landed fully. No words, no confrontation, no anger had been necessary. He had been humbled by inevitability, by preparation, and by moral authority. And in that quiet moment, he understood what arrogance and entitlement cost him, the home he had taken for granted, the security he had assumed, and the respect he had thought he could override. By nightfall, Ethan sat on the curb outside the house, exhausted, reflective, and finally aware. He had learned that authority is earned, not demanded. That consequences are inevitable when patience and preparation are ignored. And that humility is often the only way to restore what was lost. The arrogance of the previous evening had been replaced with a stark understanding of reality. And he would never forget the quiet, deliberate lesson delivered by a father who understood that actions, carefully executed, speak louder than any shout. By the next morning, Ethan's situation had reached its peak. He wandered from street to street, carrying nothing but a small bag of belongings, the weight of humiliation pressing heavily on him. The arrogance and entitlement he had worn like armor were gone, replaced by raw panic and disbelief. The neighbors who had once smiled politely now watched him with quiet curiosity, whispers passing through the morning air. He realized fully that his life, built on assumption and dominance, had been stripped from him overnight. I remained in my home, observing from a distance. My short gray hair neat, clean-shaven face calm. Slightly fuller build steady, warm gentle eyes reflecting authority and wisdom. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Every step he took, every reaction, was a product of choices he had made. My patience, foresight, and deliberate actions had ensured that the lesson would land without confrontation. Authority, I had learned, is not enforced by shouting. It is felt, observed, and ultimately inescapable. Ethan attempted to negotiate with anyone who would listen. He called friends, colleagues, even distant relatives, hoping someone could offer shelter or reverse the eviction. Every request was politely refused. The notices and locks I had prepared were precise, leaving no loophole, no room for manipulation. He realized the futility of relying on force, manipulation, or connections. The consequences of arrogance and disrespect were undeniable. By midday, the magnitude of his misjudgment sank deeper. His posture slumped, shoulders heavy with shame, head bowed under the invisible weight of accountability. His mind raced through the events leading to this moment, how a simple act of shouting at dinner had spiraled into the loss of home, comfort, and respect. Every impulsive word he had uttered, every demand he had made, now seemed foolish and short-sighted. The lesson of patience, preparation, and moral authority had struck fully. Leaving him humbled, I moved quietly through the house. Observing the calm order maintained by staff and the quiet structure I had restored. My short gray hair caught the soft afternoon light, my clean-shaven face serene, slightly fuller build steady, warm eyes calm but attentive. The house was a visual representation of order and consequence, each room a testament to deliberate action over impulsive behavior. Even without words, Ethan could sense the lesson embedded in every corner. Every routine, every silent action. Hours passed. The sun shifted, painting the neighborhood in golden light, and Ethan finally stopped wandering. He sank onto a curb outside, exhausted, the small bag of his belongings at his side. His face, once flushed with arrogance and entitlement, now carried lines of fatigue, shame, and dawning understanding. He looked around helplessly, realizing that the world he had assumed he controlled was now inaccessible. By late afternoon, his reflection deepened. He began to understand the true cost of his actions. He had mocked patience, disregarded wisdom, and demanded authority that was never his. The quiet inevitability of consequences, executed without malice but with precision, had dismantled the arrogance he once wielded so freely. Every failed attempt to reclaim control, every locked door, every denial he faced reinforced the truth. Respect cannot be demanded, control cannot be seized through anger. And entitlement invites its own undoing. I watched from the window. Short gray hair neat, clean-shaven face calm. Slightly fuller build steady, warm eyes observing the culmination of the lesson. No triumph, no celebration, just quiet satisfaction. This was not about revenge. This was about ensuring understanding, accountability, and humility. By the time evening fell, Ethan had been humbled completely, stripped of illusions of control and entitlement, and left with nothing but reflection. By nightfall, he remained outside, quiet, exhausted. Finally aware that arrogance has a cost and respect is never optional. The lesson had landed fully and irrevocably. He would carry it with him, embedded in memory. A reminder of the consequences of disrespect and the quiet authority of those who act with patience, foresight, and moral clarity, Night had fully settled over the neighborhood, blanketing the streets in a calm, almost deceptive quiet. Ethan sat hunched on the curb outside what had once been his home, a small tattered bag of belongings by his side. The arrogance and entitlement that had fueled his outburst at dinner were completely gone. His face, pale in the soft glow of streetlights, bore the unmistakable marks of shock, shame, and exhaustion. He ran a hand through his hair, realizing for the first time how utterly unprepared he had been for the consequences of his words and actions. Inside the house, I stood by the large living room window. Short gray hair neatly styled, clean-shaven face calm. Slightly fuller build steady, warm gentle eyes observing every movement. I didn't need to shout or call attention to myself. My presence alone carried authority. The home was perfectly still, reflecting the order, preparation, and patience that had quietly dismantled Ethan's illusions of control. Every locked door, every notice, every carefully prepared instruction had been designed not out of anger, but out of inevitability. Ethan's panic slowly gave way to disbelief as he took in his surroundings. He attempted to call neighbors, friends, even distant relatives, hoping someone could intervene, reverse the eviction, or at least offer temporary shelter. Every attempt ended in polite refusal. Each no etched further into him the understanding that shouting, demanding, and arrogance cannot override foresight, preparation, and authority. The quiet precision of the consequences left no room for argument, no loopholes for manipulation. By midnight, the magnitude of his mistake had fully dawned. He realized he had lost everything he had assumed. He controlled his home, his comfort, and even the confidence to assert authority. Every gesture he made shivering in the night air, fidgeting with his phone, nervously pacing, was a visual echo of his inner reckoning. The full weight of accountability pressed down on him. For the first time, he saw clearly that his impulsive arrogance had led him here, and that humility was the only way forward. Inside, I moved slowly through the house, my short gray hair catching the soft lamplight. Clean-shaven face serene, slightly fuller build steady. My warm, gentle eyes scanned the rooms, noting the quiet order maintained by staff who had followed instructions precisely. Each action, subtle and deliberate, reinforced the lesson without a single word spoken. The house itself was a testament to the power of preparation, patience, and moral authority, a contrast to the chaos in Ethan's mind. Ethan tried to gather himself, walking the nearby streets, looking for any way to reclaim control. Every attempt, every phone call, every plea, every knock on doors was met with calm refusal. The consequences were inescapable. He began to whisper to himself, muttering fragments of apologies and disbelief. I didn't. I never thought. His voice trailed off into the night. The arrogance that had driven him hours ago had dissolved completely, leaving only the raw, humbling clarity of accountability. Hours passed. The night grew colder, shadows lengthened, and Ethan finally sank back onto the curb. His posture was heavy, shoulders slumped, head bowed in reflection. The exhaustion in his movements mirrored the exhaustion of his ego. He had demanded control without earning it, shouted without thought, and disrespected the authority that had quietly always existed. That authority, the quiet, deliberate, moral authority of a father who acts with foresight, had prevailed. And he was left to reckon with it fully. By the early hours of morning, the first light of dawn painted the streets with a soft golden glow. Ethan sat silently, finally reflective, truly humbled. I stepped back from the window, warm, gentle eyes calm, slightly fuller build steady, observing the culmination of the lesson. The house, orderly and secure, reflected the balance restored through careful action. No triumph, no gloating, only quiet. Undeniable authority. Finally, Ethan looked toward the house, truly seeing it for the first time, not as a possession, but as a symbol of boundaries, preparation, and respect. He understood that entitlement and arrogance cannot claim what is not earned, and that consequences arrive quietly but inevitably. He swallowed hard, exhausted, and whispered apologies that were more for himself than for me. By mid-morning, he had accepted his reality. He approached the neighbors, seeking temporary shelter, stripped of pride, humbled, reflective. Every action he had taken before, shouting, demanding, ignoring authority, had led him here. The lessons had been delivered without cruelty, without anger, but with precision, patience, and moral clarity. And they would remain with him forever. I walked slowly through the home. The morning sun highlighting short gray hair. Clean-shaven face calm, slightly fuller build steady. Warm, gentle eyes observing the peaceful, restored environment. I reflected quietly. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words. Patience is stronger than force. And consequences delivered thoughtfully leave marks deeper than punishment ever could. And as I watched Ethan finally stand, humbled, reflective, and aware of his mistakes, I realized once again that the quietest actions carry the loudest lessons. Respect must be earned. Authority must be recognized. And those who ignore wisdom will one day find themselves facing consequences they cannot escape. That morning, my son understood it fully, and that's when I knew sometimes the weight of inevitability teaches more than anger, shouting, or force ever could. And a lesson delivered with patience, foresight, and moral clarity leaves an impact that lasts a lifetime.